I got a new end table today. Hooray! Well, actually, a very stylish end table. When I think of shapes like that, I think that looks like something that has to do with Unix. And indeed it does. This is a Sun Ultra Enterprise 3000. This machine is pretty old. I'm thinking about 1995. It says assembled in USA down here, so you know it's a good piece of hardware. Oh, we have a date. February 24th of 1998. Awesome. So anyway, I'm going to assemble this end table and take you through what it's all about. And then we're going to see whether or not it catches fire when I plug it in. No, not really. I've actually plugged it in already. It does turn on, but my super special monitor with the Sun proprietary 13W3 graphics connector is right there and not at work. So, let's get into this, shall we? So basically the story behind this is I was at the computer recycling place earlier today, and I've seen this server around for a few months now. It's been offered to me several times, and every time I've said no thanks. I don't need something else cluttering up my basement. I did express a little interest in it because, in my opinion, it's a bit historical, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, it was basically offered to me for what amounts to scrap value. In my opinion, more than scrap value, because there's actually quite a bit of gold used in these machines. So I feel I got a good deal. Not a bad end table. So this is the front of the system. It's our typical SCSI CD-ROM, spare SCSI 5 1/4 bay. Usually a tape would go in there. And then we have 3 indicator lights. Power's on. Need to throw a wrench at it, and system is running. Inside the front door of the system, which kind of reminds me of a safe door being metal on the inside and plastic on the outside, we have 10 80-pin SCSI 2 hot swappable drive bays. We have our key switch, off, on, diagnostic, and locked, so you can't halt the system or anything. We got a fan tray hiding down here. We have our grates up here, and air actually goes in the top, goes through, and the hot air comes out the bottom. Going around back, which is mostly empty right now, you have 3 power supply bays. There are 3 bays for processor boards. 1 bay is dedicated for an I/O board. And then this is the clock generator and serial board. And then over here on the far left we have a power input board, and it also provides a couple of voltages for the center plane, I believe. Yeah, we'll get into that in a second. And that's pretty much all that's on the back of here. As you can see here, we have our frame buffer, and it's just the standard run-of-the-mill frame buffer. This doesn't have the Creator's 3D graphics in it. We have our quad Ethernet S-Bus card, blank S-Bus slot, no fiber optic option in this one, SCSI, which it says you're not supposed to use, which is interesting. Standard Ethernet, and then that's basically like an AUI type Ethernet, or any type of Ethernet you want to plug in there. That covers that. Let's take a look at some of these components. Ah yes, endless banks of RAM. It's pretty synonymous with Sun in my opinion. This is one of the CPU boards, one of the 3. It actually did come with 3. Each CPU board comes with 2 CPUs. They are UltraSpark 2. Yes. These ones are 250 megahertz each. You can get as fast as 400. And they share the same CPUs that you typically find in like the Enterprise 10,000, you know, the E10K and the other Enterprise series. So it does have commonality with some of its bigger cousins, but I don't think the center plane is nearly as fast. I guess it wouldn't need to be because there's only 3 of these boards in here. And then up front here, a lot of this doesn't look like power regulation. These are actually chips to handle communications with the center plane, and this is power regulation here on these separate boards. And those little cards are not removable, actually. That's interesting. They are in my other Sun system. This is a look at the center plane connector. It is big. And let's have a look at the other side. These lock it into the cabinet, and then you have power, maintenance, and something else. I can't remember. Basically the same light. Oh, that's right, system running. The same lights that are on the front of the system are also on the back of the system. This is the power input module. Just plug one cord into here. It's kind of nice. That's your master on-off. I imagine that's a breaker. It kind of feels like it has a interesting detent system in there. Then you have component power and maintenance. That's what the bus connector looks like to plug into the rest of the power setup. Looks like some outputs are listed here. Let's see. So 5 volts at 15 amps, 5 volts at 5 amps, 12 volt rail at 8.5 amps, another 12 volt rail at 1.5 amps, and 3.3 volts at 4 amps for less than a second. That's interesting. So this powers a couple separate things that allow the system to come up and bring the main power supplies online. And it also provides the main power to them because that is the only outlet on the system. This is one of the 3 main power supplies in the system. They sit in the chassis like this, fans pointing down. And the reason why is because not only do the fans cool the power supply, they also cool the CPU and memory boards. Like I said, drawing air in from the top, pushing it through, down and out the bottom of the system. Each one of these power supplies is 300 watts, 3.3 volts at 51 amps, 5 volts at 32 amps, and 2 volts at 5 amps. Interesting. So yeah, 3 of these, they're all identical. They're pretty dirty because I actually power on all my equipment and test it first before dusting it out. So that way I know if something blows out or has an issue, it was an issue that I potentially caused. And smack it a little bit too. Couldn't hurt. One note to anyone who might end up handling one of these CPU boards. There isn't really a place to grab them where you minimize the risk of ESD other than grabbing it here. But as you notice, it's flimsy. So if you carry it around that way, that's fine. Just remember to bend it back the other way before inserting it. And obviously it'll straighten out a little bit once you fully get it seated. This board has a different CPU on it. And it is the same part number, but I noticed we got some updated heat sinks and stuff. It appeared to me that that processor has been replaced at one point. The third CPU board I'm showing you just has a lot less RAM in it. And I'm actually using this as the primary CPU board. Don't know why. This one's missing that nice little shield and some other stuff. So I don't know if that's like a design revision or it broke off. No idea. But now you can kind of get a better view down in there and see that that's actually like a flip chip package. And by flip chip I mean the processor die or ASIC die is on the top, and that's what the heatsink is directly making contact with. Wow. And all those chips almost look socketed. I wish I could get a really good shot of that, but this camera sucks. It looks like they're socketed, but they're not. You could actually see the layers, the wafers in between. Really interesting. Okay, our system is assembled. I guess the only board you haven't seen is the I/O board, and you can actually have more than one I/O board in this system. You just sacrifice processors for it, and you're not allowed to have a processor board in this slot. It must be an I/O board, because this is the only slot that allows direct access to the SCSI. Now you can see we have cheesy frame buffer here, quad Ethernet here, one spare S-bus slot, and the back plane, center plane communication. There's a DC to DC converter sitting up here. And there's a kind of BIOS. I think this is open boot, or this has to do with open boot. I was doing a little bit of reading. I haven't done hardly any reading on this system. This is all just going off of what I know. Each individual board has its own type of BIOS. Not really a BIOS, but it's actually called a post chip, power on self-test. And the clock generator board actually has the open boot PROM that handles what you would normally see as far as the quote-unquote BIOS goes. But yeah, each board has its own BIOS of sorts that handles a bunch of tasks before you actually see anything up on the screen. So I like to give everything a little bit of a smack to make sure it's plugged in the way it should be. And then you just turn these locks with a number 1 Phillips. Make sure you use a number 1 Phillips. Anything else messes these up. That one's locked. 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 And these CPU boards are hot swappable. Definitely didn't have to take the system offline very much. That one's locked, that one's locked. Okay. So we're pretty much ready to plug it in and see what happens. Kind of want a hard drive. Where am I going to get one of those? Aha! Aw, poor faceplate. Yep, here we go. 18.2 gig. It's compact. That's okay. Does what I need. Get back in there. This is a Sunfire V120. It's 600 megahertz. A little faster than this 250, huh? Okay. Drive slot 0. It's conveniently labeled for you. So if you get this wrong, I can't help you. Slide it in. Click. Very convincing. Okay. Let's plug it in, shall we? Sorry, little Alpha. Need my desk. This is a 233 megahertz alpha, as in digitals or DEC Alpha. The never before marketed uber expandable SCSI. Okay, after a brief where the hell did I stash that moment, got out my Sun Type 5 keyboard, which is not a PS2 connector. Sorry, I cannot show you. Plug this in here. The correct direction, I guess, would probably help. Okay. So at this point we're ready to power on. Plug it in. Main AC. Hear a very convincing click from a few relays in there. Now, this server is plugged into the light circuit and my room circuit. So I guess if I lose the breaker to my room, I have a good minute or two to restore power before I get into trouble. Let's try it and see if I can get away with it. Conveniently, this server takes the same key that the other one does, so not receiving the keys with it was not really any concern at all. Alright. Sorry I have to reach around. Key goes in this way. Now there's no button. It switches on as soon as you crank it over. Power there. Starts doing its self-test. Hard drives come up. Now we wait. Now conveniently, those indicator lights are also on the back of here. So as you can see, the power supplies, we have component power, and then maintenance, maintenance, maintenance. Now these guys here, component power, maintenance, maintenance, system running. These two aren't up yet. So this is going to take a second to do its thing. And while it does that, I'm going to cycle back and forth on the monitor. Input 1 should be the 13W3. I don't know if the camera picks it up, but oh, here goes video. Sorry for the strobe light action. Bad date and battery clock. Ooh. This may mean, yeah, it does. Looks like we don't have an Ethernet address, like a MAC address. Basically, the clock battery goes bad in these things, and we end up with all kinds of issues, unfortunately. Yep, just as I had suspected. Clock battery's dead. It says 1280 megs of RAM, which I do not believe is correct by any means. And it gives some other interesting errors up here. Pretty much all of it has to do with the PROM contents being invalid. So I can't get Solaris 9 to boot. It says can't load time of day module, invalid format code, and ID PROM. So let's see what we're up against. Looking at the back of the system, you can see the maintenance light is on for board 1. I believe it's board 1, should be. And the main maintenance light is on. It's a labeled one right there. So let's go ahead and pull out that board, see what's on there. Ah yes, potted chip package where it says built-in lithium battery, timekeeper RAM. I wonder how many more of these lithium batteries we have in here. Dope! We got another one right here. That's a DC to DC converter. So that doesn't have anything to do with this situation. Looks like there's two. And as I recalled, I didn't see any on the CPU boards. Guess it doesn't hurt to look. Guess they could have loaded the thing with lithium batteries. Toasty. Okay. Guess I just better thumb it all the way out here. Does not appear that there are any issues. Nope. No headaches on these boards. Nice. Okay, our battery holder is now attached. Had to flip it like that because of clearance issues. Let's try it out and see what happens. Yep, fits good. Good height. So after installing the NVRAM and reprogramming it and syncing them, we are successfully up and running. Although it still only says 1280 megs of RAM. This thing's loaded, so I don't know whether or not to believe that. But it's ready to be booted. I have a Solaris 9 disk in there, but since I don't have a mouse, this is going to be a problem. But I think I have something. I was going to wait till I hooked up my Ultra 10 to check this thing out. I've never plugged it in before. But it takes the Sun keyboard in, the Sun monitor, and it's PS2 and VGA out. Now it's still hooked into the same monitor. But yeah, let's give it a try. Well, that worked. I was finally able to use the mouse to bring up a terminal. All 6 processors, 250 megahertz. Most of them have 4 megs of cache, except 2 of them. And I guess each one has 256 megs of RAM in the bank. It's a lot of sticks for a gig of RAM, but I guess it is pretty old. Everything else seems to check out now that I've repaired the clock battery issue. And the mouse is now wigging out. Okay. So as far as the lights go, we have a blinking system run light. I only have one hard drive in it now. I did dig out my other SCSI discs. These are both Ultra 2. Then I got a 1.6 inch height Seagate Cheetah. And then I have a 15,000 RPM drive stashed in the filing cabinet, so I'll just throw all those remaining discs in here. And I'm actually not going to load Solaris on this one, I don't think. I think I'm going to use BSD. BSD is up and running. Shows all 6 processors. I got a bunch of GLX gears, and the colors look funny until you move the mouse over. And then it looks correct. That's interesting. Pretty neat. Not bad for 250 megahertz. So I'll go ahead and load it up and mess with it, but really it's just an end table. It's just a piece of history that I would like to hang on to. Honestly, I could get more out of it in scrap than what I paid, so I'm not going to sweat it.